this morning. Tom Wilson, excuse me, and Ed Stack, thank you both very much for being here.
Nice to be here.
Patrick mentioned the title of the conversation we're going to have, but Ed, I want to start with you because this notion of when should companies or corporations take a stand, you are known for taking a stand that cost you business, cost you a lot of revenue, got you a lot of attention. And talk about, for those who might not know this already, talk about why the shooting in Parkland pushed you to make the decision that you made.
Well, the shooting in Parkland had a real impact on me. And watching the kids who survived and those parents, and at that point, we realized we needed to do something. And I was so moved by those kids who survived that, kind of their parents talking about and seeing the pain in their parents, and thinking, my God, what if that was ever one of us that happened to? And you know, I've talked about this a number of times, and I'm a pretty stoic guy. Nobody would characterize me as a crier, but I've told people that I sat and watched the news over that weekend, and I hadn't cried that much since my mother passed away, and realized that we needed to do something. And we needed to realize that we were either part of the problem or part of the solution. And in our case, I actually thought we were both, and decided that we needed to take a stand and talk about what was going on and offer a solution to how we think these things could be either eliminated or be a significant less loss of life.
But there were major repercussions.
Thank you.
There were major repercussions. In one story I read in Bloomberg, the company lost about $150 million in sales, and the story says an amount equivalent to 1.7% of annual revenue. In another story that I read, you announced somewhere that 62 or so employees quit. They left the company because they didn't like what you did. And yet you talk about the decision that you made with no regret.
Yeah, we have no regret whatsoever. We actually talked about it at a board meeting, a couple board meetings ago, and decided if we had a mulligan and a chance to do it all over again, we'd do it all over again exactly the same way. And it was a pretty significant loss of revenue. We knew that was going to happen. Bloomberg's number is a little bit low, but we had it kind of laid out exactly what was going to happen, and it kind of played out exactly how we thought it would, and we'd do it all over again, and if we had a chance.
You want to correct the Bloomberg since it's a little low? How much?
It was probably around $250 million. But like I said, we had that planned. We were thoughtful on how we were going about this. We are a public company, so we had to guide the street on what was going to happen, and we're really very happy with what we did.
I want you to flesh out a quote that I read in that same article, because it talked about the threat of boycotts and everything and what that would do to the company. And you were quoted as saying, "Love is fleeting, hate is forever."
Yeah. So we found that out after Sandy Hook, and when after Sandy Hook happened and all those. Those 5- and 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds were killed. We decided that we weren't going to sell the assault-style weapon in any of the Dick's stores, and we never put it back in the Dick's store. When we opened Field and Stream not long after Parkland, which was an outdoor store, we did put it back in there, and that's one of the big regrets I've got in my career, that we shouldn't have done that, but we did, and it's out now. But after Sandy Hook, we took those guns out, and what was happened. And remember, that happened right around Christmas time. And a dad and his 5-year-old son came into our store near Sandy Hook Elementary School. And the little boy kind of went out of his mind, lost it when he saw the guns, and his dad had to take him out. And I said, we need to take these guns out of the store near Sandy Hook, all guns, take them off. And so the racks were bare, because I didn't want any kid to come in and freak out when they saw the guns. So about 6 months later, there was a conversation, should we put them back in? And our head of marketing, who's now our president, Lauren Harbart, said, let's just do a little research and see. And what we found out is that the people who were really happy that we did that, when we went back 6 months later, their conversation was, yeah, what'd they do again? Oh, yeah, that was really nice. Do you shop them anymore because of what they did? No, I actually forgot that they did that. The people who were really upset with us, I won't really use the language that was said, but you can imagine. They said, yeah, we remember what those SOBs done. I said I would never go back, and I've never been back. And that's when we coined the phrase that love is fleeting, hate is forever. And we felt it. And we knew that that would happen in Parkland, too.
Now, Tom, you're not surprised by what Ed did at all, are you?
I think what he did was absolutely right. And I think it's the right long-term strategy, too. So we're both an operating company, and we have a large investment portfolio. And while love is fleeting, and maybe those customers won't remember, today, when you look at what people want, whether they're your customers or your employees, they come to you because of who you are, more so than what you do or what you sell. And so they now know who you are. They know what your purpose is. There will be some people who won't come.
Right.
But that doesn't really matter. You're not supposed to make everybody happy in the world. And I think it is really important that businesses take a stand. Not just take a stand. Sometimes when you take a stand, it makes it sound like it's verbal. What Ed did and what companies should do is act. It's one thing to say something and put it in the paper. It's another thing to do it. And that's what business needs to do, because society is counting on us to continue to try to make the world better.
Now, one of the things, Tom, you're working on, one of the things you're taking a stand on as a CEO is that businesses shouldn't just be about profits and customers. It should be about job creation, which when you say that, what are the four things you say that businesses do, and that job creation is not one of them? So it's not taken as seriously.
Yeah, well, so this started actually at the Aspen Ideas Fest, I think like four years ago or something. We were talking about Milton Friedman says businesses should only make money, and just disagree with that, right? You got to serve your customers. You got to make money because that's one of the things you get paid to do, but you also need to create jobs and improve our communities. And in creating jobs, we're not doing enough today to create enough high-paying jobs in America, and we're taking comfort in the fact that the unemployment rate is at an all-time low, and that's the wrong measure. And so when you look at businesses need to be held accountable for creating more high-value jobs. That's why we get a license from you all to operate, which is to create jobs. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to work and be broke. And 37% of Americans don't have $400 for an emergency, so you can't take comfort in the fact that they're all working. So I think as businesses, we need to stand up, take a stand, and focus on creating more high-value jobs. And right now, we're not held accountable for it. You go to any board meeting, any Ed's board meeting, my board meeting, you're talking about profit all the time, guarantee it, right? Like it's probably in every committee meeting. If you said, how many of those meetings do you talk about, how many jobs did you create, and how many high-value jobs did you create? It's a fraction. And I think business needs to take a stand and do more about that.
Well, it's a fraction, but do they even calculate or count how many jobs are actually created?
No, it's an interesting thing. So profit, right? Like it's really important. So we have I think there's over 1 million public accountants. There's stacks of regulations. There's the SEC. There's all these people. It's important. So we want to make sure we can calculate it. If jobs are so important, why don't we calculate it? There's no measure. So I think there should be something. In the financial world, there's something called the Financial Accounting Standards Board. That tells you how you calculate profit. There should be a Job Creation Standards Board that tells you how we create jobs. So you can say to Allstate, how many jobs did you really create? Does gig workers count? Is that really a job? Is that a high-value job? How about the fact that you got to get rid of some people to improve efficiency so you can lower your costs? So we need a better dialogue. And what I do know in business, and Ed knows this too, if you measure it, you'll get it. If you don't measure it, you're not likely to get it.
Ed, do you measure it?
Job creation. We measure a lot of things. We don't measure job creation, and I think that's a really good point.
I mean, to me, it sounds like a no-brainer. Why not measure how many jobs you're creating? Why isn't that a priority? Or is it all the priority because related to profit?
So I don't think all the priority is related to profit. I don't think, and I think you make a really good point on job creation. But there's a lot of things in business that we take a look at. We take a look at things like profit. We take a look at sales. We take a look at what we're doing from an environmental standpoint and all that. But job creation is something that we really haven't looked at.
So I want to broaden this conversation out, because in preparing for this and in speaking with each of you individually, I've been struck by something, and disabuse me of this thought if it's not right. I'm old enough to remember when guys like you would keep your mouth shut about anything that wasn't related to your business. You wouldn't take any stands on social issues. You wouldn't take any stands on political issues. You would sit out. And maybe your customers would expect that of you, demand that of you. Today, that seems to be completely different. And I want to know from each of you, what is it in the culture, if my theory is correct, that has moved you as a CEO from being cautious about taking a stand to feeling that it is your duty, and in your case, moral duty, to take a stand, to personally take a stand, but as a CEO, as a leader, to take a stand?
I think you'll see more and more, and you're seeing more and more leaders take a stand like this, whether it's on this issue or so many other issues that are out there. And I think society today is just more involved, and from whether it's the teenagers, millennials, our group. I just think people want to be much more involved in what's going on. They're much more aware of what's going on. And I think that, in my opinion, right or wrong, I think that people are looking to business leaders for direction and leadership because they're not getting that out of Washington. And when people don't get leadership in a place where they would normally get it, they look to another place for leadership. And I think so many people in business today are stepping up trying to fill that void because we feel that we have to. In our situation, there is so many inconsistencies in the gun laws that are out there today. And we're trying to get people to take both sides of the aisle to come together to fix these inconsistencies. If you think about it, the MSR, the assault-style rifle that was used in Sandy Hook, Orlando, San Bernardino, the Texas church shooting in Parkland, that gun had been banned for 10 years, from 1994 to 2004. If that gun had been continued to be banned, these shootings in the loss of life wouldn't be there what they are today. The inconsistencies in our gun laws are when you look at them, I went to Washington and talked to a lot of people in Congress, and a lot of times they would look at me and go, "Are you sure about that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure." And if you think about this,
I got this briefing book right here, let me tell you, page 12.
And one of the things that drives me crazy about this is you have to be 21 years old in this country today to buy a handgun from a firearms licensed dealer like us. You have to be 21 to buy a handgun. You can buy that assault-style rifle today at 18. That makes no sense whatsoever. So I think when the leadership isn't coming out of Washington, people who understand that they are either part of the problem or part of the solution need to stand up and say something. And I think we'll see a lot more of that going forward.
Well,
go ahead. I've always had trouble keeping my mouth shut, so that's maybe a genetic problem. But I think there is, I agree with Ed on I don't know if I blame Washington for not doing it. I just think the pile of problems in America is getting bigger and bigger, despite the fact that politicians generally are working pretty hard. They're trying to do what they can in the environment they're in.
Really, Tom?
I think we're part of the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so the extent we make people go to the other side to get their money, and we bitch that they're not in the middle, we help create it. So I think, and I've tried to change it at the chamber because I felt like we were part of the problem. So I think business can step in and it's needed. Like if you just think about where America is today, nobody's happy about where America is. And if it's not us, if business doesn't step in, who's there? Like, okay, government, I think they're working pretty hard. Government, you may disagree with some politicians I know you disagree a lot with, which most of us do. But I think you need business to step up. I do think I agree with Ed that your employees, your customers expect you to do it today and didn't necessarily need to do it before. But I also think it's about us being aggressive in trying to make the world better, and that means taking on your own compatriots. And I think that's where it gets a little harder to step out. Like, it's not so hard if it's something that the other people you hang around with are going to be mad about, but stepping out and doing something that your compatriots are going to be mad about, I have found takes a little more intestinal fortitude.
Before we came on, and this sort of fortified the premise of my question, we're just sort of talking about taking a stand. And you mentioned how when the North Carolina bathroom bill came up, that you considered, like, should we take a stand on this? Well, it's not part of our core business. And there are other people out there who are talking about it. Tim Cook of Apple had made a big deal of opposing that bathroom bill. And what struck me about that part of the conversation is that you even thought about that. That you even thought about taking a stand on such a controversial issue. Back to my original point, it's not that long ago that a CEO like you wouldn't even think about jumping into that issue if you even knew what that issue was to begin with.
Well, I mean, I think, as I said, I think it's needed, but that's what we get paid to do. Like, it's not like I'm going broke doing this job. And so, if you get paid a lot of money, you should have responsibility that comes with it. And so we look at issues and we're like, first, is it important? If it's an important issue, either to our company or to society, then we'll think about it. Then, is debate needed? So on the gender bathroom stuff, I was like, look, there's a lot of people in it. It is an important issue. It's important to us. But, like, I don't need to step in just to get Allstate or my name in the newspaper and say, oh, we're for it too. Like, find something where you can make a difference, where your voice, and you have a legitimate basis to do it. So during the financial crisis, I said we should regulate derivatives. I did a, regulate me, please. Because I'm like, you know what? The banks didn't necessarily like it, because they liked it the way it was, but the way it was brought the house down. So so I think it is about finding some place where you have a unique place to add value, where it is important and your voice is heard. And I don't think that's just for CEOs. I think that's true for all of us. Like, we just need more truth speakers, because if you think about what's happening, and we're all living in these echo chambers, and we need to sort of sometimes yell into those echo chambers. It's not there. Like, let's take the media, right? Like, media is great about going out and criticizing other people, which I think is needed. Like, because sometimes you're like, I never really thought that I was doing that and it wasn't good. So I value that. Not always feeling good about it, but I value it. But, like, okay, where is the media dumping on the media? You don't see that very much.
Oh, look at my Twitter feed.
Okay, I will. I mean, high five, yeah. And I'm not against the media. I'm like, you just need to call it out. You need to call out your compatriots. And that's where it's the hardest to do it. So you probably had a number of gun manufacturers who weren't too crazy with you.
We had a number of them who said they wouldn't sell to us any longer.
Yeah.
Cut us off.
And then you're like, what'd you say?
No problem.
Yeah, fine. Goodbye. Yeah, exactly. Goodbye. That was then, this is now. Yeah.
Well, as chair of the chamber, that position that you took on derivatives was a big deal. And more truth speakers is a great thing to say. But when you are a truth speaker, that's a lonely endeavor. So what advice would you give to other leaders, whether they're CEOs or further down in management, who want to emulate what you do, emulate the way you speak out on issues, but are scared to death about what it would do to them reputationally, the damage it might do to them within the company and their career trajectories? Give them some advice to stiffen their spines.
Well, that's tough to do, because some people, the kind of advice you have to get, you either believe it or you don't. And if you really believe it, then you have to stand up and make a stand and suffer the consequences, good or bad. And I think that's one of the issues that we have in Washington today, and I don't mean to be kind of beating on Washington, but the right and the left have kind of one view, and you have to check every single box. We were talking a little bit about that. You have to check every single box. If you don't check every single box, then you're the enemy. And so you have to be able to suffer the consequences. There's not many people in Washington today who are going to vote against their party's line because they're afraid that they're not going to get money for re-election campaign, they're getting it primaried, and we need to find a way that Washington can work together. We asked them to say, come together on this gun issue with the intent to solve the problem, as opposed to coming and just talking to their bases, which is what they've done. And what we find today is, a phrase that I coined is, today in this country, across so many issues, whether it's on the gun debate, whether it's on the bathroom debate, whether it's on racial debate, whether it's on immigration debate, that so many people today who are rational people argue their point irrationally. Now, I've had people who have said to me, who have written me notes and nasty letters, and, clearly you don't support the Second Amendment. Clearly you're against the Second Amendment. Clearly you want the Second Amendment to be abolished. And since you don't believe in the Second Amendment, you don't believe in the rest of the Constitution. That is such an irrational argument, and the people who are making this are probably really rational people, but they're irrational about these particular subjects. We've got to find a way that we can debate and have a conversation without becoming irrational and personal, which is what's happened throughout the whole country today.
You know what, I would say it's about purpose and making a difference. So if you know what your personal purpose is, and you can hear Ed's purpose in his voice, I can hear your purpose in your voice when you're talking about your tweet. Like, everybody's got a purpose, right? Like, you got a purpose, you know what that purpose is, it gives you the strength, the energy, the intestinal fortitude, and know your purpose, write it down. If you write it down, you won't lie to yourself, because we always tell ourselves little stories in our head, and know your purpose. If you know your company's purpose, so we have our company's purpose written down, that tells you where to take a stand. And the other part, I would say, in the end, it doesn't matter how many titles or honorary degrees or articles you have done or how much money you've made or anything. It's just, have you made a difference in people's lives? I've seen so many people retire from our company. We've all known older people. The only thing they think about is, had I made a difference? So if you think about your purpose and you think about making a difference, that will give you the intestinal fortitude to be a true speaker and an upstander in the face of something that you hold just not true.
When kind of the same thing, a purpose. We've always felt, our whole business has been around kids. And I've always said that I think our country's most precious natural resource are our kids. And we don't spend enough time thinking about them. We don't spend enough money on them. We don't spend enough time protecting them. We don't spend enough time educating them. And after what happened in Parkland, it was, hey, we think kids are our most precious natural resource. What was happening to the kids, we decided we had to stand up and say something, and we're really happy.
Yeah, I think that's, you can hear that passion in your voice, and so it's about the kids, right? Like, I had we were in Chicago, so we had some violent stuff, and these kids were getting killed, and a bunch of the business people just said, this is crap. Like, these are all our kids. Right. Like, these are not somebody else's kids. And so I would also say, just let that energy flow. Like, if you get angry, do something about it. And you did. And everybody else does something about it, then we'll move the country forward.
And is that passion and that sort of moral fortitude, is that what is needed to withstand the criticism that you took, from customers, from employees, the employees who quit, from Wall Street? It's one thing to take a stand, and it's one thing to be, confident and sure to your core that you're making the right decision. But when you turn on the television or the radio or open up the, Twitter or read in the paper that you are a dirty SOB and you don't care about the country, and that wears you down.
It does. When we did the violent stuff in Chicago, initially the Chicago Tribune started writing some really nasty articles about us. Corporate guys in, all they want to do is measure stuff. They don't want to give the money. All these kids are out here. And we're like, well, if we say you're gonna have 100 kids in, you only have 50. Like, that doesn't really count, And so we were holding people accountable. And Jim Reynolds and I, who did it together, just said, you know what? Like, we're just gonna ignore it. Like, think about the kids. It doesn't really matter whether someone thinks I did a good job or a bad job. So I think there is some of the find that that essence that's getting you going, that gets you through it. On the shareholder thing, I think that's completely crap, to be honest. I think, you know,
Specifically about the shareholder thing, as
Yeah.
as an excuse for not taking action.
Like how many people you've talked to said, oh, well, my shareholders won't let me do it.
I have a
Like,
responsibility to my shareholders.
yeah,
I
and I'm
can't
like, you know,
possibly-
like they come in all different flavors, you know, like the noisiest ones are the ones who are in and out.
Right.
They're trading all the time, and you just have to ignore them. Like, you know, you don't get paid in running a business to take orders. You get paid to actually run the company, and so you just ignore them. And then if you lose, you're going to lose your job. I've always said, like, if I lose my job because I took a stand on something that I believe in that's socially responsible, then that's a good reason to fail. Not likely to be the reason I'll fail. If you fail, it's going to be because you didn't do a good job in the business. So if you didn't do a good job in business, you're probably going to get kicked out anyway. So you might as well just do those things you think make a difference.
But Dick's Sporting Goods is a publicly traded company, but it's a family business. So to a certain extent, you have a little bit of security in taking the stance that you take. But is that a reason to discount your bravery in what you did?
Well, I think some people would say that it is, and I'll give them their due, but we would have done this anyway, even if we hadn't, because I do think, as was said, that you do your job, you take a stand, you do what's right, and you let the chips fall where they may. But at the end of the day, when you're when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, shaving in the morning, you know you did the right thing. And if more people would do that, the world would be a better place.
So in the time that we have left, which is about 20 minutes, we're going to open it up to Q&A from the audience. There'll be roving mics on this side and that side. And keep your questions short, and please no speeches. If you start making a speech, I don't mean to be rude, but I'll cut you off and I'll be rude doing it. So, lavender sweater here, please stand up so the mic can find you.
I'm Bob.
It should be on.
This on?
It is.
Is now. I'm Bob Taylor from San Francisco and Silicon Valley. In the opening session, Darren Walker of the Ford Foundation made a very articulate and
Hold up a little more, yeah.
and impassioned plea for major corporations in this country to rededicate themselves not just to their shareholders, but to other constituencies. How do we bring that about? You guys are a perfect example of two companies that are doing it, but the vast majority of companies are looking only at the bottom line.
Thank you, Robert.
Well, I'll tell you what I did, and Ed will have his own view. 3 years ago, I took on more leadership of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and for the last 2.5 years, the first thing we did was, what's the purpose of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce? And we got very clear about what the purpose was, and it is to do some of the things you talked about. We have our own foundation there, but then we go out, and I've been using that, and so I've been in this mission to say, look, businesses have 4 jobs. We got to serve our customers, we got to make money, we got to create jobs, and we got to improve the community. In our world, we chose to improve the community really by empowering youth and helping victims of domestic violence. So most companies want to do that, but I think if we could get it into like just 4 simple things, like, because when it gets really complicated, you know, I can only handle like 3 or 4 things. And so by having a simple message, so we've been out working to do that, and it's changed what Chamber does. So we've been reaching out to a lot more Democrats, because to your point, we were part of the problem, right? Like, Democrats wouldn't support what we wanted to do, so we wouldn't support Democrats, so they wouldn't support what we wanted to do, so we didn't support them, so then they were mad at us, so then they did something else. And it's funny, you're in this like weird system, and you got to somebody just like say, stop, we're all in this together, we need to improve our communities, we need to create jobs. And so I agree with Darren about what his approach is, and I think it's then you as investors, shareholders, community members, hold companies accountable. Say, you know, it's great you made $2 billion. How much did you help the thing? Because if you look at a bunch of, particularly some of the new startup companies, they haven't yet got their legs on how they're involved in the community. because they're not, like we're in every city in America. So we're kind of embedded in all these issues. But some of the tech companies, I think, here still have to get their legs. I'm going to call them out. Say, what are you doing? Are you using, X% of your profits to improve? And your voice will make a difference.
I think companies really do want to try to make a difference. As I said, ours has always been around kids, and there's a real funding crisis in youth sports. It's estimated that by 2021, 2022, you could have roughly 27% of the public high schools in this country without a sports program. And if you think about that, it's catastrophic for our kids. Our kids need a place where they're going to go after school, where they can be mentored, where they're with their friends, where they feel they belong. And these school programs are drying up. So we've really gotten with our Sports Matter Foundation to try to help fund these teams that are having a funding crisis so these kids can play. And we've touched probably a little more than 1 million kids, and we've spent a lot of money on this to try to get these kids to be able to play. We did a movie called We Could Be King, which is about the doomsday budget in Philadelphia in 2013, where they closed so many schools, consolidated schools. And when they consolidate 2 schools into 1 school, that means there's half the amount of teams, half the amount of kids who can play, which means half the amount of kids that have someplace to go after school, and the other half don't. And one of the defining moments in that movie was we filmed a Board of Education meeting, and one of the kids said, let the kids talk, and one of the kids said, without a football team, I'm not coming to school. And if you think about that, you fast forward that to 5, 10, 15 years to the fabric of the country, how important these sports programs are. We need to keep these kids in school because we have to educate our kids. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. And I think a lot of businesses really want to try to get behind something, and every business has to figure out what's right for them. For us, it's all around kids.
You have the microphone, but let me see some hands over here. So, okay, go right ahead.
I'm Mark Brown. I'm from Aspen, and I want to address this question about Allstate. And I know the spectrum of this talk is much more than gun violence, but in the sense of Allstate taking a stand, what is your policy on ensuring liability for gun owners and any kind of incidental damage or death that's caused by your insured? Do you require, for example, that gun be registered with you, have any kind of coverage, or that insured have any kind of certification on gun safety, or any of the above? Or would you consider taking that kind of approach to make your stand known on the damage that gun violence can cause us?
Thanks, Mike.
It's a good question. So we made a decision not to sell insurance to people for just guns. Like, we thought about this because we had some people approaching us saying, look, if you could do that, you could charge a lot of money for the wackos, and that would stop them doing it. And we're like, we just didn't think that would work. If you do have a gun in your home, and something happens, so we do cover damage related to that. We do not do underwriting that says, do you have the right training? Do you have the right, because it just would be prohibitively expensive to do that for every home. So we insure about 6 million homes, and we get about $1,100 per house. So it's a lot of money in total, but if you were to go out and try to prove and make every customer tell you, here's my permit, so we don't do that. But if something does happen with a gun in your house, you are covered for your liability. But we don't sell insurance to people just for guns. Like if you buy a gun and you want to cover yourself from liability, we don't do that.
Question there?
I was curious, at Dick's, what is the minimum wage at Dick's, and what is your justification for whatever that number is?
Our minimum wage is about $11 an hour, and we're taking a look at what we're going to do with the minimum wage going forward. One of the issues that I'm concerned about from a minimum wage, I'd love to see some bifurcation of it, because one, I think the unintended consequences of the minimum wage are, again, everything we think about is around kids, is that at $15 an hour, you're going to find a lot of kids aren't going to be able to find a job. So I love the idea of a $15 minimum wage. but I'd like to see something that for teenagers, it can be less than that so that they can get a job. We'd love to be the place where kids come and get one of their first jobs, especially the ones that love to be around sports. So we think that the minimum wage conversation is a debate that we plan to be involved in.
Yeah, and I think on minimum wage, you know, it's easy to say you should. So our minimum wage is $15 an hour. We went there 3 or 4 years ago. I didn't even know it. Like I was walking around one of our service centers and it came up that it was $12. I'm like, I didn't even know that. I'm like, well, let's just make it 15. And you know, people didn't really, you know, that's kind of the way we did it. They were like, oh, it's going to cost this much more. And I'm like, you know, like we can handle it.
How did you, just go on. How did you not know it was, the minimum wage was 12?
I mean, we you know, our company's got $40 billion of revenue, you know, $100+ billion of assets. Like, I don't look at everything we do. And so I was walking around, and it turned out, and I said, well, we should just fix it. And we just went to 15. But we could do that, and I don't know how we got there, and I'm kind of a point-forward person. I said, look, we pay people, they add enough value where we can pay them $15 as minimum to start and go from there. And so we just did it. I think the trick is, like, some of Ed's jobs don't add as much value as some of our jobs. And so one of the things we get paid to do is to deliver the right product to you at the right price. So you don't want to overpay, nor do you, so we have to do it. That doesn't mean we should pay people less than they deserve. So I think our challenge is create more high-value jobs. And I think it's a really big issue today because what's happening with digitization and in artificial intelligence, it's going to be like a tsunami that rips through the service industry. And there are jobs, we're getting ready, like our employment's going up, but we're working hard to make our employment going up because there are a whole bunch of jobs that we don't need people to do anymore. We settle the claim on your car with 6 pictures, do it in 7 to 15 hours. Used to take 7 days. We don't have 937 drive-thrus anymore. So we should do that for you. But I got to then figure out how to create a high-value job if the computer is going to take that low-value job. So I think our challenge is, how do you create more high-value jobs?
Question right here in the blue. Could you stand up so she can get the mic to you? Anyone over here? I don't want to ignore anyone over here who might have a question. Okay.
As a young leader, I mean, you guys are amazing leaders of your companies. How do you take a stand internally? You got to fix within first, right? And you've got employees who are in high school and have a lot of the same issues, $400 in savings emergency funds. What do you do?
Thanks.
Not as a CEO in the company?
As a CEO.
Oh.
As someone who has control over those things.
I'm not sure.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah,
So you guys both have internal communities, right?
Yeah.
Internal employees. How do you take a stand on issues with them? And also
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, how do we take a stand with them? One, you always, of course, are out talking to people. You also have all kinds of social media stuff inside the company that you can hear on. But we've done some stuff this year, which was we actively worked to encourage people to go out and vote. And we didn't tell them who to vote for or how to vote. We just said, you know, half of America is not voting. We need to vote. You need to stand up. So we're actually taking some of it and doing. The other part I would say is it becomes part of the employee value proposition. So we help, as I said, empower youth, do volunteer work in the United States. When we do a We Day in Chicago, in any of the cities we do them, we have to restrict the number of employees that go, because we have other partners who sponsor it with us, and they want to have some of their employees go. So we make it part of the employee value proposition. We have a Good Hands Week where everybody volunteers in the week. We give people time off. We give money to their charity. So it's about, and this is, I don't think we really talked about this much, but I assume you guys are in the same place, which is people come to work for you because they believe you're a good company today, not just because you pay $15 an hour. And so when they know what you stand for, and if you give them a choice to invest in the things that their time, in things that make them feel better, they'll be better employees.
We do a lot of the similar things. So we have we get out and talk to people all the time. We have town hall meetings. People can come to on different subjects, give their opinion. We gave everybody time off to vote in the last election. We think it's really important to get out and vote. into the same thing.
Good. We didn't do that, but I should think about it. Yeah, I mean,
We made sure
it's
people had
expensive,
time.
but
We made sure we had people, gave people, we didn't tell them who to vote for. We had thoughts, but we didn't share them. But we gave them time off to vote. A day of giving. We do a number of different things inside to keep connected with our what we call teammates, or people who work with us, our teammates, to make sure that we're doing the right things and give them a voice on what we're doing and how we do it.
Question right there. No. Sorry. Behind you. Yeah, sorry.
First off, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for your leadership in the space. Obviously, there's no shortage of matters of societal importance where we need companies to take a stand on. But what are some of the criteria that you've put in place when considering employee advocacy and the concerns that they bring to you, saying, hey, I really think we should be, raising our voice here or using our influence here, leveraging our platforms? So if you have any thoughts on kind of how you evaluate what comes to you, it'd be great to hear.
Thanks.
We take a look at that as to what we think is important to our teammates, what they really want to be involved in, and then do we have the expertise to really weigh in on those issues? And we're not going to weigh in on things that we don't have, that we have just enough knowledge to be dangerous about. So if we've got things that we feel we have an expertise in, that we can make a difference in, that we take a stand on, then we'll do that, and our teammates want us to do that.
yeah, we try to do the same thing. Occasionally, though, we'll do something just because nobody else is doing it. So we got into domestic violence because it's an ugly issue, impacts 25% of American women, and businesses had bailed. So we got in, not even really knowing what we were going to do. They did come back to us as we got into it. They said, well, how clean is your house? And I'm like, that's pretty, I'm married a long time. I think I'm good. But they were really asking, what are your company's policies and procedures around victims of domestic violence? So we had to make sure we were right there. Then what we did is we found that money is often a weapon of choice in domestic violence. And we know something about money. So back to Ed's point, I'm like, oh yeah, we know something about money. So we now have trained 1.5 million women on how to get out of an abusive relationship because the man ran up your credit card, takes your paycheck, all that kind of stuff. So I think sometimes it's what you're natural, then sometimes you just know what you're good at. You find this space and you go there. So something I'm kind of interested now is family financial fragility. It's a problem when families don't have enough money, right? You all know if you've been in a situation where your family didn't have enough money, leads to fights at the house, on aspirations you can't achieve, and I don't know what to do about that, but I know it's not right in America. But I know we know something about money, so we'll see if we can. And if we can't do anything, then we'll let someone else do it.
There's a question over there.
Hi.
Amanda, I see you.
Sorry. Hi, this is actually just to build on the time after vote. So just next month, Harvard Business Review is putting out a new case on corporate civic engagement that was written by some friends of mine. There's a launch in Washington profiling 10 companies that have gotten involved in getting their employees to register to vote and really encourage them to do that, including time off to vote policies.
Question.
So my question is just in terms of your ongoing civic engagement going into 2020, have you been thinking about what more you can do to push your employees to participate, how you are going to navigate that landscape very specifically for the election?
Thanks.
We would expect to be doing the same thing, to give people the opportunity to vote, and then also trying to help them, people who need to register to vote. So we'll give them the opportunity to do that. I think, I think it's really important that we as companies communicate to our employees, to our teammates, that it's really important to vote. It's one of those things that, not to be cliche-ish, but a lot of people fought and died for our ability to do that, and not to go do that, I think, is a real sin.
So for employees, I don't know, I need to think about this, whether we give them time off. I need to talk to Ed and see about that. But I would say we also fight it on another level, which there are people who don't want us to do that, and which is on things like gerrymandering. So we're regulated in 50 states. We play the political game 50 times. And we get involved in how do we pass laws or get things to change in gerrymandering. Not been very successful, I will tell you. But we spent some money on it. And we have some people outside our company who want to know every place we spend money so that they can try to embarrass us not into doing that stuff. It's about political contributions. And they're like, well, you need to tell us everything you do. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you everything we do if you tell us everything you do. And of course they don't. And what they're trying to do is embarrass us not to stand up for the American political system and say gerrymandering is just like voter suppression. And so that's another thing we've been trying to fight on.
Amanda.
Hi, I'm a journalist at The Atlantic, and I cover corporate activism a fair bit, and it seems like there's a bit of a sincerity gap between companies like yours who are willing to lose money and make real changes in your business, and companies that are in it for a press release or a commercial and a warm and fuzzy press cycle. What do you think about those companies? What do you think about efforts like that and what their impact might be?
Well, I think it's, I'm not going to, I think everybody has to do what they think is right for their business, and I think one thing we as Americans are pretty good at is knowing that people that are sincere and people that aren't. So I think the people that do that for a press release or kind of a news headline, people see through it pretty quickly. Because if you don't sustain that view and that policy, people know.
Yeah, I'm with that. Like, we'll do what we'll do. We'll try to convince other people to. But I would say I think it's about leadership. Like, I actually wouldn't say it's the company. I mean, as a CEO, you do become the company. It's a little uncomfortable. Like, I actually don't like it that much because, what you do is what people think about the company. But it comes with the territory, so there's nothing you can do about it. But I think what you're talking about is the lack of leadership. There are just some people in every profession who don't have the right kind of leadership capabilities, and that's politics. Like, I think it's one of the things we're missing. Like, I think we had people who stood up, had the intestinal fortitude to do what they should do and do what Ed talked about, and whether it's gun laws or anything else. So I think it's really about personal leadership.
So I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and use the last less than 2 minutes to ask you a closing thought. I mean, one of the things that sort of undergirds this whole conversation is the lack of trust in institutions. It's not the lack of trust, it's the erosion of trust, given everything that we've seen. You name the institution, we've learned about things that has shaken our understanding of them and our trust in them. Is there a way, or can we regain our trust in those institutions? You're each trying to do, in your own way, regain trust, whether it's in business or just in humanity. But we've lost a lot of trust. Can we get it back?
I think we can. I think that trust is not just in institutions like the ones that we run, but it's also from a government standpoint. Right. I mean, it's across the whole gambit. And I think we can get it back, but it's all going to depend on who's leading those institutions and who's involved in those institutions. And if you have those who just are worried about the next election or just worried about the next paycheck or the next quarterly results, then it's not. And we have to really find and identify those leaders who are willing to take a chance and make a change. And maybe some of them get run over in the process. But if you're not willing to take that chance, then we're not going to make a lot of change.
My answer would be yes, because people believe in America still. It's all of our polling, everything. People believe in America. They are distinctly unhappy with what we've got going today. And so what I think we need to do is fix it. The issue, I think, is too many people think we have too much time to fix it. I mean, it's like, fix it today. Like, I don't know about Ed, but I'm like, I got a problem, boom, get it today. No, problems don't age well. It's not like wine. Like, they just get worse. And I feel like what we're doing is we keep putting this stuff off. And it's like, no, this is a problem, fix it and move on. So I think we can get trust back, but we need to pick up the pace.
Ed Stack, Tom Wilson, thank you very much.
Thank you.